blue sky contains the rest. Ancient words stand thin and proud, like people shuffling through a crowd. And here I stand, so small and far, singing to a single star.
Welcome back to another enlightening episode of Seeking the Light of 1,000 Suns. We're thrilled to have you with us. Today, we're taking a plunge into the foundational aspects of tarot decks. While the origins of tarot are shrouded in mystery and debate, we encourage our listeners to explore this history further if they're inclined. Now, a quick disclaimer, we're not here to claim mastery in professional tarot reading. Our aim is to provide a blend of entertainment and education. Tarot is a vast universe with diverse decks, spreads, meanings, and applications. In future classes of our Tarot 101 series, we'll delve deeper into these fascinating aspects. So whether you're a seasoned tarot enthusiast or just beginning your journey, buckle up as we embark on this exploration of tarot basics.
Buckle up,
Hi,
Buttercup.
Maya. Buckle up, butter. I know.
Hi, Gia.
Hello, how are you?
I'm doing well. So,
yes, the tarot.
The tarot. What we know about a tarot deck is that it is in two main sections. One is the major arcana, and one is the minor arcana. And each section holds like distinct symbolism and significance in the readings itself.
Yes. Sorry. So
today we're going to go into the major and minor arcana and just a little bit about the tarot. Mostly because there are so many different variances we can't get into one episode. Even not just for the reader, but for the person receiving the reading. So the first 22 cards that are numbered 0 to 21 are the major arcana.
These cards represent significant life themes, archetypal energies. Also, the visual representations are not always inclusive enough, which could lead to misinterpretation. For example, the death card does not solely signify the death of life. So you have to pay careful attention to the divination and the different elements that are shown and represented on each card.
Right, like the death card is as Gia is saying, does not necessarily represent loss of life. It can be the death of a cycle. And that cycle that this card is representing is going to be dependent on the other cards surrounding it. So there's also other major arcana cards. For example, the Fool, the Magician, the High Priestess, the Lovers, the Tower, the World, Star. These are the most known in a deck, and we'll go over those more in depth later.
So these cards, they often reflect major life events, transitions, or spiritual awakenings. I know for me, when I have done my own tarot readings, when looking at the major arcana cards, like Maya stated, you know, you have to also look at the minor arcana cards, the before cards that came down on your spread, the cards that follow on your spread, to be able to sometimes get the full picture of what's going on. Tarot readings, to me, for me, I have to set aside a good amount of time for myself to do them, so that I'm not missing anything in the interpretations of the reading. Yeah, so for me, I mean, it's not like a wham bam, there you go, but it's taking the time to really delve into it. Now, sometimes that's not always necessary. So that's why I'm saying, you know, it's for me, I have to do that. For those that do this at a mastery level, they oftentimes don't have to put as much time into it, because they're getting these interpretations through them so quickly and so rapidly, and they're processing it then and there. It is a form of divination, and for me, it's a form that I am still very amateur at. So, you know, if you're at that level where I'm at as well, take your time. You know, the other thing I like to do is I like to take pictures of the spreads and really go back and look at those pictures and kind of reflect upon them more as the day goes by.
In the major arcana, the big thing about the major arcana in a reading is it's signifying, or signaling, I should say, a big importance. The word major would be showing you something that you really should really be grabbing your attention, something that you really need to know. There are some people, to get to know their tarot, will pull out just the major arcana and study and play with them and do readings with just those. And I would recommend, whether you're starting with a full deck or a split deck or whatever have you, I would recommend for starters to get to know the deck, to get to know the feel, to get to know the meanings, and how to read the interpretations and such, is just do one card. It can be that simple. It doesn't have to be a 10, 11, 12, 13 card spread. It doesn't have to be in all these shapes. It can just be one card. And they are not used for yes or no questions. It is very, very much questions need to be worded open-endedly, because the answer that you're going to receive is not going to be a yes-no answer.
I remember, you know, it's with the major arcana, it's another way to think about it too, is that it represents universal themes, things at the higher level. Sorry, folks, I'm working on a cold here.
So the other part of the deck is the minor arcana, and that is 56 cards that are divided into suits. The most common suits are the wands, the cups, the swords, and pentacles. Different artists, though, with decks will use different symbolisms, but there's still typically 4 suits. Each suit contains numbered cards from 1 to 10, along with 4 court cards. And the court cards are going to be the page, knight, queen, and king. In our upcoming basic 101 tarot classes, we'll go more into the significance of those numbers and the court cards. Today we're going to focus on the major and minor arcana.
Yeah.
So the minor arcana is also the difference between that and the major arcana. So the major arcana is going to be significant event or significant thought process, something that should be in your face. And then the minor arcana is the stories and the relationships surrounding it as far as the reading is concerned.
The more personal and mundane aspects of one's existence. Think about for the minor.
Right.
You know, is there an aspect of the Quarren's life that, you know, has it's an emotional aspect, challenges, opportunities, relationships? Those are going to be more reflected there on the minor arcana.
Right. So let's go into the suits a little bit. The swords. So the swords are often associated with the realm of mind and intellect. They represent thoughts, ideas, beliefs, mental processes, action and decision making, the need to make choices, to take action, to confront challenging situations head on. Despite the difficulties associated with the swords, they also represent truth, honesty, and clarity. So when I think of the swords, I think of the power of word, the power of words. They can encourage facing reality and seeing things as they truly are, and seeking truth and wisdom. So let's say you're doing a tarot reading based on, Gia, pick a topic.
Oh, let's see here. Am I going to, how about this? Am I going to find a love interest this year?
Okay, so the topic would be love interest. Now, if the swords were to present in the spread, revolving around that question, they're going to be giving a relationship focus in either advice, challenges, difficulties, how to, maybe warnings.
Things that could be holding you back.
How to approach yourself or approach the other person. So they're either really a warning or they're a direction, right? In other words, they may warn involving relationships if there's a specific person in mind, for example. Like she opened an open-ended question, she asked an open-ended question, which is perfect. It's not specific, it's not specifying a specific person, but it will bring out some understandings that either pertain to herself or what she's seeking in a relationship.
For example, with that question, the swords might tell me that I always find them to be very straightforward, blunt, sharpness of the blade. But it might tell me that for me to have a love interest, I would need to work on my personal interactions with others. Or it could tell me in order to find a love interest, I would need to put myself into more situations to be around people. And it can be pretty vague, which we can delve into later, and how you can try to ask the universe for a little bit more specifics. But there could be, it could even, state that, not so much as like not at this time, but that there are certain roadblocks that need to be met.
Things
right?
you need to work on, or they need to work on,
or in the positive light, well, they're all positive. Well, they help you to grow, but it could be something as simple as, you've met these goals. And so it would lead to, as long as you stay on the path you're on, right? Things of that nature. They, sword cards suggest the importance of assertiveness, courage, and determination in facing obstacles and resolving conflicts. They remind us to use our intellect wisely, communicate effectively, confront challenges with courage, and seek truth and clarity in all situations. That encompasses a lot. And so when working with the swords cards, keep a lot of that in mind, resolving conflicts, being assertive in what we're striving for, having our courage, etc.
All right, the next one is cups. Cups are the realm of emotions, feelings, and intuition.
These are closely associated with relationships, connections, and interpersonal dynamics. They can indicate the quality of relationships, emotional fulfillment, and the need for nurturing and maintaining connections with others.
Yep. And anytime I hear cups or see cups, I think of emotions, because I always think about, is my cup empty or is my cup full?
Yes, I was thinking that too. The whole fill your bucket or empty a bucket or someone else's bucket,
Right. Or are you pouring all of your contents into somebody else's cup?
Exactly.
Or are you taking all the contents from someone else's cup?
Oh, yeah.
So they can also relate to intuition, spirituality, and the subconscious mind. They can represent inner guidance, dreams, and spiritual insights. So, as I was saying before, like with the elements, it might be easier to remember the cups as the element of water.
I like that they do suggest the importance of listening to one's intuition and following one's heart. Also exploring the depths of the subconscious. A good example of this is, when you really, you pay attention, of course, to all the cards in a spread, but a good sample question would be about a dream that you just had, right? And trying to understand its meaning. The cups will draw significant information into that because of their connection to intuition, spirituality, and subconscious mind.
What I like about the cups is, you know, the 10 card spread, the Celtic spread, these other spreads, they usually have a emotional placement. But what I like about the cups is, regardless of whether you have that placement or not, if it shows up, and your question does not pertain to something emotional, let's say, it's not about relationships or healing or these types of things, I like that it also is something for you to consider, is that it's also a card of water, of clarity, of subconscious, of flows, of mirroring, and some other things. So I'm trying to say is, sometimes it speaks to us, to our conscious mind, what's going on in the subconscious mind. So you gotta kind of, with the cups, you kind of have to have that understanding, is that if it's not making something really clearly not making sense to you, keep in mind that this can be something underlying in the subconscious or the higher self.
Another thing about the cups is they are linked to creativity, imagination, and artistic expression. They help to encourage one to explore their creative potential. Is another one for me that kind of hits home, because for a spread I did to try to inquire in my absolute desperation how I can possibly get myself out of the stagnant life that I've been in, stagnant financially, so on and so forth. The cups appeared a lot. I do remember the cups appeared a lot, and it is really interesting because I did that spread a while ago, and then shortly thereafter I did this amazing speaker event, and then sat down in front of my laptop one night and just started to pour creativity onto a Word document. Started writing my first novel. And now 1 year later, I've just finished that first novel. And so if I go and sit down and do another spread, it'll be interesting to see what those cups read now.
Right.
It's a good example for that.
One of the other things that I like about the cups, and it kind of a little bit goes with what you're saying, is because they can represent water and fluidity and such, along with emotions as well, is sometimes with water emotions, relationships, and everything like that, if you think about it, you have to ride the wave.
Yes.
You got to go with the flow. Instead of trying to swim upstream or trying to paddle the opposite direction at high speed and making yourself exhausted and feeling defeated and feeling like you're staying in the same place and that you're not going somewhere, that is where those cups are going to show up sometimes too. And so
Absolutely.
sometimes you have to follow the path of least resistance, and sometimes that emotionally hurts. But the path of least resistance is always going to give you the biggest and most impactful and healthiest outcome.
They also symbolize healing, renewal, and emotional growth, which tags on to what you're saying too. Healing from past wounds, letting go of emotional baggage, finding one's own inner peace and contentment, self-care, emotional healing practices, embracing forgiveness and compassion. These are all things that we need as well. You know, when you look at the difference now between swords and cups, right? Cups tells us what we need on our path to healing and journey and fulfilling, having a more fulfilling life, right? Swords direct us with action.
Now, I'm making some correlations as we're doing this that have brought me a whole different level of understanding.
Yes.
Okay, so for example, I started to kind of put an element to a suit if somebody has an easier learning understanding that way. But now take that one step further. With just the suits, two suits, just the two suits we've talked about. What does water do to fire?
It extinguishes it.
That's
and
right.
Creates air.
So, for example, your emotions in your cups could distinguish your intellectual thinking, your path to progress, your action, completing an action,
which is, oh, go ahead,
sorry, it could impede decision making. So I'm kind of liking this element train I'm on right now.
I'm liking it too. I mean, it actually, it coincides with a lot of expressions, right? That we grow up with, which, like on the science, the STEM path, right? They try to teach us, that the answer to anything is typically the simplest. Okay. And then they back it up almost every single time, and it's like, holy crap. But it delves more with logic, right? Versus creativity, although you have to be imaginative to really be able to help come up with new innovations. You need a balance between both, which is why I'm also loving what you're saying too, because, in the STEM track, we learned that, you have to keep your emotions in check, the irrational side, right? There's a time and a place for it all. But in order for your logic brain to come out, you have to do it without bias. You have to do it without the emotional side. It is a very difficult discipline to learn. And it's a very humbling field, because you have to be able to not disconnect, but block your ego all the time. And remember, this isn't about you being a person setting off to prove themselves to be right or prove others wrong. If anything, you should set out to prove something wrong, but not other people, but your own guesses. Try to prove your own guesses wrong, because then that is the simplest solution to your problem, right? To your question. You can do this while trying to prove yourself wrong. Then it cuts out the bias, cuts out the ego. It also cuts off the emotional side. I mean, sometimes you still get emotional about it. You're like, dang it, I worked so long on this darn experiment, right? But then you got to bring it back down. And I love this because, cups, I mean, to understand how they're giving us information that we need that has to do with the emotional side. In balance, like you were saying, to the swords with more of the logical approaches and how to get what you're seeking.
Yes, having a delicate balance of emotions will keep you from overshadowing the other elements.
Yes.
So the next suit is Pentacles. They represent more so the material aspects, like wealth, abundance, material possessions, house, home, money, and our relationship with those resources.
Well, I don't always have the best relationship with my resources. Okay, sorry. I wanted to throw something out there. But no, seriously, I need to listen and pay attention to the Pentacle cards more. They could indicate financial stability, prosperity, or even opportunities for material gain. They symbolize the tangible results of hard work, effort, and perseverance as well.
Or if think there's always an opposite as well. It could also mean loss of these things as well, and we'll go into that further into classes. For example, if you are a investor, let's say, it could either be good and saying you are increasing your gains, or it could mean you made a poor investment and it is you're accumulating loss. So I know we probably should have brought this up at the very beginning before we talked about cards, but as above, so below, right? So everything has
two sides of a coin.
Yes, everything has polarity. Okay. So it can indicate career opportunities, financial rewards, direct you on focusing on long-term goals, focusing on stability. It can also represent the physical in a sense of grounding. So, okay, so the Pentacles would be the element of earth. And the physical would be things that pertain to you being grounding.
Physical plane.
The physical plane, yes. So they symbolize the importance of maintaining balance and harmony in your physical health, your physical environment, your lifestyle, as well as like your career, your financial goals, your material type things.
So the Pentacles, they also represent the qualities of stability, security, patience, practicality. they encourage us to cultivate a healthy relationship with material wealth and resources. I'm an earth sign. Oftentimes, and I like this because it's just connecting all of these things together, right? I often live very much in the practical in my mind. And I sometimes focus too much on the material, the resources, the work, my job. So much so that I often forget to have that balance, right? With my emotional health, the cups, with expanding my directions with the swords. And so it is one thing to note too, I think, that when you're giving readings or you're receiving readings, think about the things that you often find yourself doing a lot of, right? Or focusing a lot of your energy on. Because when you think about these things and you realize, okay, I sometimes may not give enough to my emotional bucket or to my directive action bucket, right? And it'll also help too with understanding the interpretations of the monarchy.
I kept getting these thoughts about the 4 elements and them representing the 4 corners. Now, not everybody calls corners, and that's okay. But just think about the 4 elements being on 4 corners. Okay. If you have an excessive amount or a diminished amount on any of the corners, you have a structure that is not stable.
Oh yeah, I like that.
Right? So
yes.
In order to have stability, they have to be equally balanced out. Otherwise, you're going to be unbalanced. The foundation is going to be cocked, tilted, leaning, almost like legs on a table.
Yes.
You want all 4 of those legs to be of equal length.
Oh, I love that.
Okay, so that kind of got off the topic a little bit, but we were still kind of in the topic of elements with tarot. So
yes,
think about that when you're thinking about balancing your cups, your pentacles, your swords, and your wands. There's a delicate balance. And the tarot can help you find that. That's what's amazing about it. If you utilize it for yourself, there's other forms of divination you can use for this as well. But you can learn more things to recognize about yourself to make that balance.
Which I think is a really great tie-in to our last.
The wands.
The wands. Why? Because they represent the spark of inspiration and the potential for new beginnings. This beautiful cycle, right?
The wands represent the spark of inspiration and new beginnings, like you said. If it's easier to think of wands like as if a witch's wand, you're going to boop, and you're going to create something with it. For spells, for magic, or whatever. There's like a burst. It's a burst of inspiration. And this would be the suit of what element?
Fire. Fire.
Okay. Spark. Let me think of fire. Spark of inspiration. So in as far as cards and layouts goes, this is going to be action steps that need to be taken.
Mhm.
You know,
Action steps.
yep.
Yeah.
Action steps, initiative, how to keep momentum, how to get things moving forward if they're stuck. Like, again, we're thinking about the four corners, right? Let's say you're stuck in water. You're in
Yep.
mud. Let's say you're stuck in mud. Maybe you're stuck in earth and water and you're stuck in mud.
Mhm.
This would be what you would do to get unstuck, if that makes sense.
Does.
To seize an opportunity of action.
I also like that too, the, representing your willingness to take risks, right? To pursue your dreams with actual determination. The action of it. So wands also relate to spirituality, intuition, and the inner fire of the soul. They symbolize our spiritual journey, the inner guidance, the connection to higher consciousness. So like when paired, for example, with the cups, depending upon the question, but also where the person is at kind of in their own state of being right now, you can really see how, okay, well, the cups is telling me that from my inner self, this is what's happening, right? Or what's going to happen, or what has happened, right? And then the wand comes in and it's making that, it's giving you that guidance, that direction you need to slightly change, alter, or take the direction that is given by the cups and the wands.
So it might show actions to take to personal growth or expansion, new adventures or challenges. So I've even seen where it will spark new skills or new talents. It will also sometimes provide a direction specific to a question that you had asked. Especially when you're talking new beginnings, and the sparks. Sometimes it will point you into a creativity of some sort to move you in the correct direction based on your question. I kind of feel like I repeated kind of what we already covered.
One of the things I like is the willingness to step outside of our comfort zones. When doing a reading, I mean, each person has their own conditioning, set boundaries, etc., right? And to do a reading openly is to understand without bias that the person that you're reading for is not someone that you may know as well as you think you do. And they might have a lot of stuff, a lot of trauma, for example, right? And they might not feel comfortable stepping outside of their comfort zone, even in what they might deem as a conflict, right? And this card or the suit might lay before them to help try to guide them into, okay, now is a time for you to start either taking big steps or baby steps outside of your comfort zone to initiate or fully engage upon said changes.
I like to kind of think of it this way. So fire can be either a spark, right, where things are instigated or derived from, but it can also be destructive. But usually the destruction of fire is for starting a path to something new. So a lot of times when I've done readings for people, when the wands come into play, more often than not, they already knew and saw either this spark and were holding themselves back, or they were seeing the approach of destruction, right? But then there's a whole nother type of people that are not even willing to, or aren't ready, I should say, to even acknowledge.
Yes, I think that's a good.
So this is where the wands get really difficult when you're doing a reading for someone. For example, I've done readings for people that weren't ready to accept or admit, even. Sometimes it's even just an admission because they don't want you to know, which we'll get into the ethics a little bit later too. I've had both happen to me where, one of them is I say, hey, you're on a path of destruction and all the bridges are burning, right? You need to decide. You may need to make a decision. This is what this looks like. And a lot of the responses out of fear, are they're not ready to take that step, or they're not ready to acknowledge that.
Yes.
But I also have had people that just don't want to even downright it. Like, for example, one of them was about family drug usage.
Yeah.
And even though all of the signs and everything were there, right? This person was not ready to accept that truth yet. Or they didn't want me to know that that was their truth. So,
You have to consider ego. Ego is not, again, there's the polarities, right? Ego should not always be seen as something of negative context, right? Because it is both. I mean, ego, whether deflated or inflated, those are the extreme sides, right? But a balanced ego can see things more clearly, like you're saying, Maya, when the ego, whether through the different emotions of disgust or fear, so on and so forth, right, gets deflated or inflated, it sometimes does not want to allow the owner of the ego to absorb the information. Ego is a very interesting aspect of being human.
right. And, the thing is when you're getting a reading from someone else and you're asking a specific question and they touch on things you're not ready to acknowledge, or you're not ready to acknowledge out loud, or you don't want the reader to pick up on, that's fine. It's your business. It's not anybody else's business.
Yes.
Sometimes people feel obligated to confirm or deny. Sometimes people feel like if I give more story, I'll get more results in the reading. If everything's already laid out,
Yes.
you're not obligated to share anything private that you don't want to share, because I mean, everything's out on the table already. So
true. I
so
think oh, go ahead.
I was just going to transition. So if there's something more you want to add.
Well, one quick thing I know, so we're gonna discuss ethics in a future podcast and in the classes. But I think that this is a really good thing to kind of consider too, right? For me personally, I feel divination should be something that is treated as like a doctor-patient situation, with respect and confidentiality, so that the person who's getting the reading can better feel that sense of comfort that they need to be able to process, or even maybe have an emotional moment, right? Because when you look back at or think back at what we've just discussed here today, these are high impact items that can produce a range of feelings, thoughts within oneself.
Sometimes they need hours or days to absorb.
Yes.
I mean, when you're
Yes.
getting hit with a bunch of new information, sometimes you need processing time.
Right. And I'm thinking about it too, a lot of people approach life with wanting to hear good news, right? Hoping to hear good news. But deep down inside, what we often don't see about one another is that they're dreading potential bad news. But and so their reactions or our reactions to a reading might be in and of itself potentially confrontational. And then, like you said, Maya, sometimes they just need, or we just need, a few days to process, or weeks, or whatnot. And that helps us to also kind of understand that not every attack is a personal attack too, as we're giving readings as well.
And I love that you brought that up, because what the reader and the seekers, or querent, or whatever you want to call the person that's accepting the reading, the reader should for sure at least know this, but what everybody needs to consider is the tarot is a snapshot in time, and that time is now. And so, as Gia was bringing up, you might be hearing news you didn't want to hear. It might not always be positive. The beauty in that is, oftentimes, that information can be used to change the path of that reading. So keep that in mind when you're getting a reading, or, giving a reading. Keep in mind that this is a snapshot of now. This is as if nothing changes. This is the way things are going to proceed. But as the querent, or as the person getting the reading, any choice that they make at any moment can change that path, that direction, that glimpse. So I like that you brought that up, because just because a course got altered from what your reading was does not mean that it was a bad or wrong reading. Please keep that in mind. You might have made decisions, whether conscious or subconscious, from that reading that changed the outcome. And that's why I think that instead of looking at things as good or bad news, or, good or bad, take that as information, as a glimpse of the path that you're currently on. And then you're empowered to change it in whatever direction, or lessen impact. If you can't completely change it, you can certainly lessen the impact.
Absolutely. And in addition to that, you know, if you're the person who's giving the reading, and a lot of us do this, but you know, understand that the person receiving the reading could be set off emotionally from this. You know, and you know, everybody reacts differently to things, to news and such. I'm not saying anybody should have to take any abuse, but just having that empathy, that understanding that, you know, this is something huge. You know, I mean, it could be just as huge as the doctor giving a diagnosis of cancer, or, you know, a lottery ticket you just bought being the winning one. There's a lot of huge changes that can occur, you know, with readings, or that could be discussed, I should say. And so being ever mindful too that some people will react very strongly, potentially even a little harshly. And respectfully, we each have our own rights as well and boundaries. So I think that that's a big thing. I know, like for me personally, I mean, I'm pretty used to direct speech, and right, wrong, or indifferent, I'm pretty used to taking the brunt of blame due to my direct speech. And I have developed very tough skin. So when giving someone news that they might not like, you know, I let them vent.
Well, even different decks can give different.
Yeah.
Whenever I do a reading for someone, I say, would you like the bold and direct or the more light and fluffy?
Like yes.
Because if you want to skip the foo-foo,
yes,
and just give it to me the way it is,
give it to me, baby.
Or do you want something that's a little bit more gentle?
Yes.
Because it's going to be more of an emotional based deck.
It's a really great point. The different types of decks too.
So we're gonna quickly go through major arcana. There is a numeric order to them, and we'll discuss numbers and orders and stuff in the Tarot 101 class. But for right now, we will give short descriptions of the major arcana. The first one is 0. So most decks are going to have it assigned that number, and it represents new beginnings. It's the Fool. It represents new beginnings, innocence, spontaneity, and taking a leap of faith. Fool doesn't necessarily mean aloof. It doesn't necessarily mean fool like we perceive the word. It represents the energy behind everything being adventurous and new, if that makes sense. And if it's reversed or diminished, then it would be lessened, correct?
So the number 1 card is the Magician. It symbolizes manifestation, creativity, power, and resourcefulness.
Number 2 is the High Priestess. She represents intuition, inner wisdom, mystery, and the subconscious mind.
Number 3 is the Empress. symbolizes nurturing, abundance, fertility, and maternal energy.
Number 4 is the Emperor. The Emperor represents authority, stability, structure, and leadership.
Number 5 is the one that I always have trouble pronouncing. It is the Hierophant. Did I say that correct? Oh my gosh. I know this card, but I always mispronounce it. Symbolizes tradition, spirituality, guidance, and religious beliefs.
Number 6 is the Lovers. This represents love, relationships, harmony, and choices.
Number 7 is the Chariot. Symbolizes willpower, determination, success, and overcoming obstacles.
That one's easier for me to remember because I think of the Chariot as like horse and buggy, you know?
Yes, yes.
And that it takes you from one place to another.
Oh, I like that.
From point A to point to the preferred or planned destination.
Ooh.
And so for me, that one is easier to remember because of that. And of course, number 8, Strength, that's easy for me to remember as well. Because it's usually depicted with some symbol of strength, like whether it be a lion or whatever have you.
Person holding barbells. Yes.
Represents inner strength, courage, resilience, and self-confidence.
Yes. So then number 9 is the Hermit. I often get the Hermit. And that's why I always remember the Hermit. Because it symbolizes introspection, which is something that I do often. Solitude, wisdom, seeking inner guidance. The Hermit.
So whenever I think of the Hermit, I think of the Hobbit.
Oh, I like that.
And that helps me remember the meaning of that card. Number 10 is Wheel of Fortune. It represents cycles, destiny, change, and unexpected events. And that one's kind of easy to remember too if you think of the game show Wheel of Fortune.
Yes.
You're taking a spin, and what happens?
Could change your destiny.
Could change your it could change. You could win a cruise, or you could go bankrupt.
Absolutely.
So
Number 11 is Justice. The Scales symbolizes balance, fairness, truth, and karma. And when we get a chance, I do wanna talk very, 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 very briefly about karma. But justice, think of those scales. Think of, if you want, maybe for some, a courtroom. Anything that represents truth and fairness.
Number 12 is the Hanged Man. And the Hanged Man represents surrender, sacrifice, perspective, and spiritual enlightenment. Which is really odd because when you think of those words together in a sentence, it seems almost contradictory. But if you think of like surrender and sacrifice and perspective.
Joan of Arc.
Okay. I was thinking kind of about like meditative or breathing or things like that. You are putting yourself into a...
Yes.
Not stalemate. You're putting yourself into a holding pattern where everything around, where you're at a standstill to gain, whether it be enlightenment or just extra insight or what have you, you're going into a still mode.
Like that. So, my favorite, number 13, death. For me, it's very easy to remember. The Grim Reaper always pops up in my head. But it symbolizes transformation, endings, rebirth, and letting go of the old. You think of the life-death cycle, right? In so many different philosophical ways. Death is that card, if you think about, a reaper, right? And, not only like reaping what you sow and how, it could end something and start something new, or vice versa, or, cutting out the crops, so that it, because now they're at the end of their cycle, right? And it's time to plow your field and to, reseed, fertilize, and start that new growth pattern. Transformation, the cocoon, the butterfly. This is the death card.
Kind of like the phoenix, right?
Yes, I love the phoenix.
14 is temperance, and that represents moderation, balance, harmony, and blending opposites. Temperance. That's the way I remember that one.
Like that. And number 15, the devil. This is actually another card that is really easy for me to remember, right? For me, the devil and the devil in the details, the devil of something, right? Or, for some religious beliefs, a devil, right? Representing temptations, materialism, bondage, self-limiting beliefs, right? I think they're just, it's for me, it's very cut and dry. Like, the devil card is the representation of the material temptations,
or being in your own personal hell.
Yes. Limitations that are preventing you from getting what you want or desire, or in reverse, having excess coming in.
16 is the tower, and it represents sudden change, upheaval, revelation, and breaking free from illusions. So this card is usually pictured with a falling tower. And some pictures are more graphic and some are not. But it's kind of this feeling of your stability being rocked, right?
Yeah.
The scramble, the, oh my gosh, shit just hit the fan. That's the way I think of the tower.
Let's see here. The 17th card is the star. Symbolizes hope, inspiration, healing, spiritual guidance. For me, I think of look to the stars, right?
Or wish upon a star.
Yes, wish upon a star. Yes. I mean, even like the hope that even the literal sense of a star that brings, right? Because it's a ball of gas, and certain conditions cause it to become and be what it is in creation, and then we look up to it and we get to be in awe of the beauty and magnificence of it.
18 is the moon, This represents illusions, intuition, the subconscious mind, and facing fears. I usually think of the moon as like cloudy. You know, when you think about seeing a picture of a moon with a cloud moving across the front, not seeing quite clearly the moon. It's usually the way I think of that.
Number 19 is the sun, symbolizing joy, success, vitality, enlightenment. Think about, for me, some of the things that, you know, when I go out into the sun, what do I receive, right? I receive vitality. I receive more vitamin D, right? I mean, it's a literal, but you know, it does. I mean, it gives us life.
Yeah, that life force. Number 20. Judgment. This represents awakening, renewal, rebirth, and self-reflection. So it's more like a self-judgment, kind of like the devil's, your own personal hell. Judgment is kind of, well, not always self-judgment either. Sometimes that can be external as well. Now I'm thinking all kinds of different scenarios in both directions.
I always just think of Terminator Judgment Day. But no, but it's seriously though, right? Because like, you know, depending upon what you're facing in any given moment, right? Whether it's like you're literally facing like a robot that's trying to murder you, or, you know, a lot of really hard life things. Judgment comes in and it represents, you know, that moment of, like it says, like awakening. You're having a moment of awakening, and you're reflecting upon things about yourself, life, you know, that'll lead to potential renewal.
That can even, yeah, that can even be in a good or bad scenario. So like, think about it like in a courtroom. Let's say you are in a courtroom and you are, well, it doesn't matter if you're the plaintiff or defendant. What happens when the judge mallet hits that desktop? At this point, until that hits, you have no idea what the conclusion or judgment is going to be. And once that mallet hits, you're enlightened with that judgment. And it can either be a good thing or in your favor, or it can be a bad thing and not in your favor.
And number 21 is the world, symbolizing completion, fulfillment, wholeness, achieving one's goals, the embodiment of what your goal is.
I think of it like the whole world in your hand.
I like that.
So in our Tarot 101 class that's coming up, we're going to talk more about the different spreads. There's so many different ones. What G and I would recommend starting out is just doing one card at a time. But if you feel so inclined, there are many, many different kinds of spreads. And as a matter of fact, some people even create and make their own. One of the funnest things that I've seen personally is to help you get in tune with and connect with and understand your deck. Buy one of those ones where you're creating your own. Where you're coloring them, adding whatever colors you want on them, adding whatever verbiage you want on them to help remember them. And then there's different reading techniques. Some people will do intuition based on the artwork depicted on the cards. Some people will use books that they've purchased, or even books that have come with the cards themselves. There is no one better than the other. It's just a matter of preference. If you use the intuitive method, it's difficult at first because you may be doubting yourself, but it does help you develop psychic abilities or enhance them. So keep in mind that we've all started somewhere. We've all started at the beginning, and you don't have to have confidence or be a professional to start. Start baby steps. We'll talk more about ethical stuff as well. However, as Gia was saying as well, it's really, really important to give people their privacy, that a reading is confidential in a quiet place and it's private. But also, there's a level of consent and boundaries in readings also. Okay, if somebody comes to you with a question, don't get sidetracked into the reading because you see something and start diverting or giving more information than is being asked unless you ask consent. And another ethical thing to consider is handling sensitive and challenging questions. Always give people understanding, give them patience, give them professionalisms, use your manners, show empathy. And tarot in witchcraft. This can also be used in spell work and rituals. It can be used in your own self-discovery and personal growth. As a matter of fact, this would be really good to work and coincide with the shadow working. Because we talked in our last episode about shadow working and where do you start, and some people have a bunch of things that are not on the surface and they don't know what they should touch on as a priority or how to dig some of these things out, and you can do that with the tarot. There are many ways that they can be incorporated into your practice. Our Facebook page and the show notes will have some other resources available, maybe some recommended books that we recommend. And also I'll have a couple tarot cheat sheets put in the Facebook group. So if you would like access to those, please join our Facebook page, Seeking the Light of 1,000 Suns. And we will then invite you to the group where you can get the handouts and podcast extras. We really, really, really appreciate all of our listeners. Please like, subscribe, and share so that we can gain a larger audience. This is very important to us. We want to be able to give people the things that they would like to hear. A lot of that stuff is not available to us right now in our insights and analytics because our following is not large enough. So please like, follow, subscribe, and share. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for joining us and listening.
Have a great night and blessed be.
Blessed be.